Roll Tide Bama fans, it's your boy Mizzy. I'm here today to go over the 2026 schedule prediction. I wanted to wait for the quarterback to get named. This past Saturday, Kalen Russell was named the starter. So let's get into the schedule prediction, y'all. Okay, first of all, guys, we know everybody is talking about Kalen Russell. You know, that's the main news. He's been named the starting quarterback this past Saturday. And of course, you know, it's going to be a lot of hype right there. That's good and well. But like I said, I want to get into some other key factors that I think will be more important. The O-line / running game has to be improved, guys. You know, last year it was terrible. You know, it was a miracle that we went to the playoffs and won a playoff game after being down 17 to Oklahoma. Like I said, that just shows, like, even the Ty Simpson haters, look, Ty Simpson, he pulled some miracles out last year. But, you know, I think, like I said, the running game, guys, Daniel Hill probably will be the starter week 1. I do think eventually Crowell will sneak up and start to get more snaps because he's probably more talented and probably more of a home run hitter than Daniel Hill, but he's lacking the experience and he's lacking the practices. You know, he was coming back from an injury. So Coach DeBoer said he was hoping that this week he probably will be returning to practice. We'll have to see. And then Trayshawn Brown, people have been really impressed with him. You know, they said Trayshawn Brown, he almost took a play right to the house the other day. You know, like one hand off, he almost took it to the house. So like I say, Trayshawn Brown and Kevin Riley. I do like Riley catching the ball out of the backfield. Smaller back, but he does run hard. So like I said, I do think they have the talent to run the ball. But the question is, will the offensive line be better? You know, with offensive lines, you know, last year we had Caden Proctor, real big guy, super athletic, but his style of play really didn't match the whole offensive line. You really got to have an offensive line that they gel together good. You know, everybody got to be on the same page. So, like I said, I think this year, this line, they match more. I think they'll gel together quickly. And then, you know, one thing, when I get into the schedule is softer, so they have time to kind of grow and get better before they get into the backload of their schedule. And then, guys, one of the things that I think probably is, I don't know if it's underrated, but it's not talked about as much. This Alabama defense, this will be what carries them through the season. When Kalen Russell does have a game that he makes a mistake, because yes, he is a young quarterback, he throws an interception. Hopefully it's not a pick six or nothing like that. But this defense is what they can lean on when it's times that, oh, you know what, we just going to run the ball. If we got to score a touchdown, 10-point score, you know what, let's lean on this this defense, and that defense will get us out of here with a win. One thing about this defense, you know, they're quick to turn the ball over. We seen last year what Xavier Brown does, Bray Hubbard, and the guys, like I say, even a guy who doesn't get mentioned as much. I do think Keon Sabb will take a step up this year. He kind of last year was, you know, here and there, but I think Keon Sabb will take a step this year. And then, like I said, with the defense, guys, I think everybody knows how good this secondary is. Like I said, with Keon, Xavier, Bray Hubbard, everybody knows Dijon Lee that the secondary is super talented. But the D-line is what's going to make this defense really dominate. You know, you can be a great secondary, but when you don't got no guys up front to put pressure on you, even the best corner, if they got to cover for so long, a guy will eventually get open. So like I said, the D-line has been upgraded. Terrence Green, London Simmons, Tompkins, and I really think Yanze Pierre, he started coming on with the second half of last season. I think this year he's going to take even a step up. I could see Yanze Pierre this year having an 8 to 12 sack year this year. Like I say, one thing, the defense got bigger, more physical, and like I say, they look like a SEC defensive line. You know, everybody who's been in the scrimmages and practices, That's all they talking about. So I think this year will be Kane Womack's best defense, and he'll be able to do more stuff with this defense. You know, when you have a defense like last year, that the secondary was great, but you're not getting no pressure. You got to become creative. You know, you start seeing Coach Womack last year start to, you know, send a corner blitz, and now you're having to bail out extra defenders that you could be dropping back in coverage. But now, like I said, with the defense being so weak, now you have to do that. But like I say, I do think that defensive line will be upgraded. Then the wide receiver room, Ryan Coleman Williams. One thing I think that people are missing, this is his junior year. You know, I don't know if he's going to leave next year or, you know, try to play another year. But say he does want to leave. This year is a big year for Ryan. You know, freshman year, stepped on the scene, surprised everybody. You know, everybody 17. And people got to realize this guy is still young, super talented. You know, they said Ryan this whole offseason, he's been practicing catching balls, not using no gloves, you know, and he's been catching impressive balls, which we all know he can do. The one thing I think with Ryan, you have to catch the easy passes. You know, it's almost like in NBA terminology, a player like J.R. Smith that could hit the tough three when somebody's covering him, but he misses the wide open three. And you're like, man, you got to be able to just catch the simple pass, Ryan. You know, he dropped one, I remember in the Georgia game. We ended up winning that game still, but them are pivotal plays that you can't have reoccurring. So I do think this year Ryan Williams will step up. And then, like I said, I just feel Ryan's going to have a real big year. I think a lot of people they're going to be like, wait, this was the talent that we seen the first year. And I still say Ryan had a okay year last year and just went up to his standard and his expectations. Then you got Lazir Brooks. You know, Brooks, he had been in a boot last week. They're expecting him to be okay. You know, just taking precautions because the season about to start. But probably the biggest thing, guys, Noah Rogers. Well, he was spotted in practice. Man, this was really surprising to me because I thought Noah Rogers, when his injury was said, I thought he was going to be out at least 6 to 8 games. Because, you know, they said Noah Rogers, this injury was a serious injury. I think it was a lower extremity injury. But now, like I said, he's back in practice. Coach DeBoer said today in the team interview, he said Noah Rogers is ahead of schedule because, you know, he's in his rehab good. So that's great news for the team and for Keelan Russell because Noah Rogers is kind of shored up for a lot of people, that third wide receiver spot. You know, one thing, it's good and bad. When you got a guy out hurt, that just means other guys got to get more reps. You know, Derek Meadows, they said Derek Meadows been balling in camp. Cedarian Morgan, you know, he hasn't been getting as much buzz, but Cedarian Morgan, 6'4", I do expect him to be a pivotal piece some point in the season. Like I said, he's a big guy who can be a key piece, you know, get targeted in the end zone, guys. But anyway, like I said, you know, there's just some key factors I'm thinking for the season, guys. You know, let me know in the comments what y'all think about it. But let's go and get into this schedule right here. So first of all, guys, looking at this schedule, you know, this is, of course, you know, with a 9-game SEC schedule, you're going to have, even the games that we think are not teams that's tough, can be like a tough, you know, game. But I do think this is an easier schedule than some other people's schedule. So like I say, it's manageable. But let's get into it. You know, first game, like I say, September 5th, East Carolina Pirates in Tuscaloosa, Bryant-Denny. Man, we already know that's an easy win. Like I say, 12 p.m. kickoff. I do expect, I'm wondering this because with Keelan being named the starter, I do expect Austin Mack this year to get snaps and stuff. You know, because Keelan, one thing about Coach DeBoer really likes Austin Mack, so I expect Austin Mack to still get snaps for more tape to be put on. And then it's always good to be ready because you never know what can happen in the season. But I do expect Bama, I expect after this game, a lot of people to be talking about Keelan, talking about how impressive he looks. if I'm thinking how Ryan Grubb and the coaching staff would do this game, Kalen may have like a 12 or 15 game, like a real good passing game. But I expect this game to come out early and establish the run. You want to get it like soon as the season coming, boom, let's get out and establish this run. So, like say, guys, I'm thinking this game probably be 48-6 game. Maybe the defense give up 2 field goals. Hopefully it's a shutout. But then, like I say, next week, September 12th, we got the Kentucky Wildcats. Now, this is an early road game. This is a good road game because, like I say, the Wildcats, they're not a real tough team. But, you know, Will Stein, like I say, new coach. They got new offensive coordinator, new pieces. Like I say, and they got the quarterback who lost out to C.J. Carr last year. He's starting for Kentucky now. So, like I say, you know he has to be good because Notre Dame did recruit him. But, you know, I think the thing that will help Alabama in this game, the Kentucky Wildcats, they're very questionable at wide receiver. So I expect the Alabama defense that game to, you know, really buckle down, probably create a couple of turnovers. You know, you may have a pick six, fumble, get Keelan and the guys a short field position. So I expect Bama to win that game. You know, maybe pull out, you know, 35, like I say 35, 14, 35, 21. Like I say, you never know because when you're on the road and like I say, you got a young team, a young quarterback, you never know. Like I say, if he could get rattled, like I say, especially with a new O-line. All of these games right here will be us figuring out how good this O-line can be. You know, like I said, you got East Carolina, then Kentucky. So we like, okay, we're not judging the O-line harshly, but we need to see improvements over the season. Then you go to FSU. Man, you got to win this game. You got to. Last year, we all know what happened. You came in last year talking about you was going to get revenge. I like nobody's talking this year. Just come in the season and take care of business. Like I said, the one thing that's good, this FSU game is in Tuscaloosa, so you got the crowd behind you and stuff. I think Bama wins this game going away. I can see this game being a 38-17 game. You know, I do think one thing about FSU, Ashton Daniels, he showed some flashes when he was at Auburn, guys, last year. And Deuce Robinson, he's probably the best player for FSU, the wide receiver. So, like I say, they do have some talent out there. One thing about it now, guys, in college football, you got to come every week prepared to play. It showed last season when Bama lost to FSU and you don't come prepared. You know, Coach DeBoer kept talking about that all through these scrimmages and stuff. He like, man, look, we just want to keep focused, just keep the game plan going. Because like I said, he seen last year, you went into the FSU game and you laid an egg. But like I said, I think we beat FSU. Then, guys, South Carolina, we got the Gamecocks. Man, you know, one thing funny, and you know, I've been saying this since last year, even though South Carolina did give us a scare last year, I think that was more because of the defense was how good it was. But man, some people just refuse to let Sellers go. And look, Sellers has immense talent, but it's been a while since that 9-3 year. It just, that South Carolina offense, it looks bad, horrible at times. Last year, Harbor, he led the team in 30 receptions last year. 30 receptions. That's your leading wide receiver. So, like I said, we'll see how that goes. And, you know, this year, South Carolina, they got 28 transfers. You know, with all these transfers and all this movement, guys, one thing, it won't always work. I know we seen Indiana last year, but Indiana wasn't all transfers. And then there was more mature team. You got to realize you won't always just be able to bring in an influx of a bunch of guys and it just click immediately. No, you will have to build team chemistry. So like I said, I got Bama winning that South Carolina game. Then like I said, one thing I like that some of these tough early games that you got, that some of the SEC games, you're playing at home at Tuscaloosa. Then, like I say, Saturday, October the 3rd, you play the Mississippi State Bulldogs. This is an obvious win. The Bulldogs, they just don't got enough guys. They don't. It's funny because they had the Bulldogs, then they got Georgia. Then, Saturday, October the 10th. So this one right here is a big one, guys. Like I say, playing Georgia in Tuscaloosa. As good as in Tuscaloosa. Man, so when I did my Georgia prediction, guys, I had Alabama winning this game. When I've been looking back over the schedule, just thinking, I got the Bulldogs pulling this one out. I got the Bulldogs winning this one 30-27. I just think, when I sat back and thinking, I'm thinking the offensive line. I think they could, like I say, that's the 6th game. I think the offensive line will find some footing. And not just, I don't think they'll play horrible that game. But I just think Georgia has more experience. Gunnar Stockton has more experience. You got your starting running back. So I think that Alabama, this will be one of those games that they lose, but people will say, man, that team is still young, and they lost that. So I got Bama losing this game 30-27. Like I said, when I did my Georgia prediction, I had Bama winning. But thinking back over it, I got Georgia winning, like I say, a close one, 30-27. So like I say, the first loss of the season. And then, like I say, I just think, Gunnar last year, he had 24 passing touchdowns, 4 interceptions. He don't make many mistakes. I do think Gunnar probably will have a turnover this game. Like I say, this Alabama defense nasty. If Alabama do pull this game out, it will be because of the defense. And maybe, Keelan, maybe he just pulled some magic out. But like I said, I just got Bama losing them with, like I said, probably 30-27, maybe a walk-off field goal. Then, guys, you got the Tennessee Volunteers. This Tennessee team is real interesting because, today, Tennessee actually, like I say, they had a true freshman, Faison Brandon. He was named the starting quarterback. And, some people were surprised, but you're going to see a lot more younger guys starting in college football now. Just because when you got somebody immensely talented and people are so scared of the transfer portal and, somebody offering a crazy NIL deals, a lot of these guys are going to be getting started early. I think that's one of the reasons a lot of Alabama fans, we was like, man, we don't need Keelan Russell to sit another year and then all of a sudden somebody take him. Now he's balling somewhere else. But like I said, one thing about Tennessee, they do have a young quarterback, but they have a good O-line. And like I say, they got the running back, Bishop, back. I think he had like 1,000-yard season last year. And then like I said, this is at Knoxville, and Bama recently has been struggling with Tennessee. So I think this is going to be one that the defense really pulls home for us. I think this probably going to be one of those ones, 27-21, like I say, tough road game. Last year we kind of won that one. Xavier Brown got a pick at the half, kind of ran that one running away. I think this will be like a 27-21 game, being Bama favor. So then, like I say, guys, then Saturday, then we got October the 24th, the Aggies, like I say, in Tuscaloosa. I see a lot of people probably have Bama losing that game. I have Bama winning, and yes, I know how good Marcel Reed is, but I just think this would be the game, like I said, because you're starting to get more reps. I think this will be the game. Of course, I know the Aggies defense good. This will be one of those Keelan Russell games when he throws for 300 yards, 4 touchdowns, and he just outplays Marcel Reed. And people look like, wait a minute. I thought Marcel Reed was the more experienced quarterback, and you start to see like, okay, Keelan Russell, he's starting to get in his groove now. So like I say, I got Bama winning it. Not sure the score, but like I say, I got Bama winning that in Tuscaloosa. Then like I say, it's good that you got some of these big games in Tuscaloosa after leaving, like I say, Knoxville. Next week, guys, that's a bye week. Everybody know every time before we play LSU, I always have a bye week. Then, like I say, you playing LSU in Baton Rouge. Man, this right here is a tough game. I was thinking over this because this one, I think this is a 50-50 game. This right here, this is a 50-50. And especially depending on how LSU schedule is. These games at the end of the year, they are so pivotal to who's getting in the playoffs. I think you're going to have two teams fighting it out hard. I got Bama pulling this one now, guys. I just think Kalen, at this point, he's going to be rolling. I think Kalen, they ain't going to start getting in Heisman considerations. And the defense, I think Sam Levitt, that defense, I'm telling you, this Alabama defense is going to surprise a lot of people. I think they're going to make Sam Levitt look human this game. You know, I know LSU got a lot of hype. I seen today with, you know, picking up the guy who left the NFL and all that. Whatever. That's like I said, that's a whole nother topic. But then, guys, like I said, I got them beating LSU. Then they're going to Nashville, back to Tennessee. Not in Knoxville this time, but Nashville, playing the Commodores, Vanderbilt. Like I say, Diego Pabio not walking through that door. No, as I know, he's not walking through that door. How everything going now, I don't know. It could be tomorrow, and they like Diego Pavio. He's got a 12-year eligibility. You know, we'll see. But I got Bama winning them just because, if like I say, it stays how it is. Vanderbilt got a new quarterback. I just think that defense and that offense gonna be too much. Then next week you got Chattanooga. I say easy game, blowout. Austin Mack in, easy win. Then, like I say, November 28th, of course. Like I say, I'm glad this ain't in Jordan Hare. That's why I just look, because you know when we play Auburn, any team play Auburn. When you're in Jordan Hare, it just weird stuff happen, guys. It's like I say, weird stuff happen. But like I said, I got Bama pulling out, winning. What's that, 7 in a row versus the Auburn Tigers, extending that win streak. Just keep stumping a mud hole in y'all. Even though, like I said, it have been a couple of tough ones in that win streak. I think Bama gonna finish the year strong. Like I said, it's in Tuscaloosa. We all know when it's a rivalry game, no matter how Auburn's season is going, they'll get up for that game. And then, like I say, they do have a new offensive coordinator, new head coach. So, like I said, we'll see how their season going. I think Alabama should win that game. Because, like I say, Alabama the better team, got more talent. I think they'll finish it. So, like I say, I got Bama finishing the season 11-1. Like I say, that should put them in the SEC championship game. And like I say, you know, I was right now, as far as, you know how people have what's the floor of a team, the ceiling of a team. You know, when I was looking at these games, I think it was 4 games on here that I see as like games, like say, really the games to lose. It's that stretch, that Georgia, Tennessee, A&M, LSU stretch. I think that's the 4 that's really gonna tell what this team is. You know, even if they went 2-2 on that streak, and Bama ended up being 10-2 for the year, you still couldn't be mad at that, Bama fans. I know we won't. Like I say, I hope Bama go undefeated. I hope we beat Georgia, but that's just the team I got us losing to. But then, like I say, guys, you know, it's gonna be a good year, guys. I hope everybody hyped, ready for the season. But anyways, guys, let me know in the comments. Let me know what y'all predictions are for the year. What do you think? What games are you most excited for? Which games do you think like this could be a trap game? Because like I say, there's some games on here that South Carolina, that Florida State. There's some games on there that can be a trap game. But anyways, guys, like, comment, subscribe, share. Catch you next time.